Hey everybody, welcome back. I want to show you today a representation of a solution to the sequenced objective manager that someone had made a request for. So in this particular situation, we've got a door, it's locked, we've got some buttons in front of us. If I step on them out of order, they shut down and they come back. If I step on them in the correct order, then the door becomes unlocked and I can leave. So let's look at what's going on here and see how we can assemble this. I have a manager over here and I have the object over here. This is a activated actor that we've inherited from a class we defined in a previous video. And then over here, these are activated actors that were inherited from a class that we generated called sequence activated actor. So I just added a sequence manager to this, which is a class that we're going to use to oversee all of this. And then I inherited my heavy duty super colliding super button from that sequence activated actor class. So the buttons that I have on the ground are just versions of this empty thing, which is just a version of our activated actor. For conveyance purposes, I did create a basic material that has some emissiveness to it, and I gave a parameter to it. So you don't necessarily need that if you have the proper materials for the assets you're using in your project. So ignore anything that has to do with setting the color. That's just me getting some conveyance down. So let's start off with the sequence manager, since this should be able to be abstracted beyond the context of the button. There's a few things we have going on here. We have the key sequence, which is something that's going to be selected by the designer. The current sequence, we don't need to see that actually. The current sequence is going to be the current pass that the player is attempting to do by touching on different buttons. Available on start is just determining whether or not this quest is open initially or it needs to be activated to be executed. We have the activated targets list. This is a list of BP activated actors that we created. This is basically going to determine what things get switched on or off when we finish this mission. And then we have the activated targets activate and activated targets unlock. These are map type variables. And so a map type variable, you just set that up here in the details panel. You can change it to single, array, set, or map. And so a map type variable is basically going to allow you to take one variable type and in an assumed array, connect that to another variable type. So in this particular case, we have a list of whether or not these things are going to be activated and whether or not they're going to be unlocked. And this allows us to do things like, in this particular case, I could choose the door that I have, it's set to unlock, but not to activate. So I could change the behavior just by clicking this button here, to have it not only unlock when I push the buttons, but to open up when I push the button. So I don't even need to go over there to do it. So the idea of this checklist, I'll look at some functions there to show you what's going on. But these maps are basically just connecting for each of the activated targets. What are we doing with the activation? What are we doing with unlocking? All right, so let's start at the very top. When we initialize this, we're going to determine whether or not it's active on the begin play or it needs to be activated. Once the quest is activated, it's going to go through that key sequence, which was created by the designer. They add objects to that in real time. So if I have the objective manager over here, when I have this key list right here, this key sequence, I can add more actors to that if I want to. But within each one of these, I can eyedropper which one it is, and then the cool thing about this is that I can lock this here real quick. I can look and see this is red and then green and then yellow and then blue. If I wanted to, I could switch the order of the green and yellow, so it goes red, yellow, green, blue, and now the quest will complete when I just run down the line. And so the idea that I can just set my sequence right here by the order in which I add things to the list here for the key sequence. And for me to be able to jump between them without selecting them, I'm just locking the details panel here so it doesn't jump. Otherwise, when I click it, it'll go to that specific actor. All right, coming back to the sequence manager, I'm going to go through that key sequence, and for each one of those things, I'm going to set the sequence manager to the self of the whatever manager is calling it. So in the actor, it's going to know who to communicate with when it needs to update the quest. And then when that's done, it's going to reset the actors if for some reason they have pushed the buttons or done something along the way. All right, after we get this initialization, we're going to be listening for if the quest is complete. So if the quest is complete, what we're doing is we're going to get the current sequence whenever we're going to check progress. and we're going to add the object that was telling us to check progress. So when we interact with a button or a chest or whatever it is that's in the sequence of events, the sequence actor is going to send itself along. We're going to check that current sequence, and we're going to get the value of the key sequence at that point and see if they're the same. So when I add something to this, it's just going to grow that from a blank array to an array that hopefully matches this key sequence. If the key sequence is, if it's correct, if it's true, then it'll come over here to see if the two sequences are completely identical. If they're not completely identical, then it will return false. If it is, they'll return true. If these actors are not the same, then when it comes up here, it'll call a reset action, and then it'll clear out the current sequence. This allows us to start again from scratch. If you don't clear out the current sequence, then you'll never be able to complete. It'll get a soft lock for the player. And that's how we check for progress. Now, if we do get the quest completed, we're just going to go through each of the activated targets, and we're going to go for this map for the activate. If it is set to true in the map, then we're going to activate the target. If not, we're going to not activate it. And then same thing here. If it's true in the unlock list, then we'll unlock the target. If not, we'll leave it alone. So that should be it for the sequence manager, except for this little function right here. This is a function that I added, so you don't have to manage the lock or the unlock and activate lists on your own. It's going to go through each of the activated targets, and it's going to add the item to this map. And so this is how you, it's like adding to an array, but when you add to a map, you get to add the key and the value simultaneously. And I'm just setting the key to the array element and the value to true or false. So this, we could have done it just as an array of booleans and then tried to map them. But this allows us to more clearly, when we're inside of the editor, if I'm over here and I look at the activated targets list, I can always click on that door specifically to make sure that I know which one it is and what I'm working with, so that when I come down to these lists here, if I go to look at it and say, okay, this door is not going to be activated, but it is going to be unlocked, I don't need to guess about which order the objects are in inside of the list, because order would matter to these things. And the function that I created for that, I set it to be usable call an editor. And so that allows me to get here, and then I could go to my list here. The activated targets, I've selected that manually to say this is it. And then these other two, if I wanted to, I could delete those. And when I say map completion behaviors, then it'll bring these both in. It'll unlock and activate by default. And so I'll just change that, and then it'll let me know things are all good. I have all my pieces accounted for, and what it will do for each one of those by default will be to open and unlock. But if for some reason you didn't, you can turn that off. Going back to the class, we're going to go to the button class. Inside of the viewport, you can just see I have two cylinders, one button, and it has the lockable attribute or component from our inherited class. This set color, as I mentioned before, I have this function. This is just to allow me to build a dynamic material. So if I get the button, I get the material for it, I can create a dynamic instance material, and then that'll allow me to modify the color just by adding this value here. So set color will pass the value in, and then if it's blank, then don't do any resets or use color. And if it isn't blank, then pass in that new color into this value. Again, if you have your own materials, that should not be an issue. I just call that here in the reset behavior and on the activate behavior, just so we can give it a indicator as to whether or not it's been toggled on or off. All right, so in event begin play, because the manager is setting itself onto this class, we want to make sure that we buy a frame for that manager to run its event, where it says get each of these sequence actors and then assign the sequence manager to self. That may run at the same time or before or after this. In order to prevent that from throwing an error, we're just going to do this little kind of hack together where we check to see if the sequence manager value is valid on this actor. And then if it's not valid, we're going to delay until next tick and fire it again. And it'll basically do this until it's resolved. and then this will pass through to is valid. And is valid will set us up to bind an event. And so for us to bind an event, we're going to look at the reset function. So in our sequence manager, I did neglect to mention we have a event dispatcher for reset. So we call reset here, and we call reset here. But this is once you create the dispatcher, bring this up, you can say call. It gets you that node. But now that I have this object inside of sequence manager, once I compile, if I come over here, any reference to sequence manager, you can see reset key actors. That will get you this function down here. Unfortunately, is not the one that we want. What we want to do is from sequence manager, we can say bind reset key, and it'll give us this guy right here. Or you could say assign bind to reset key, and it'll give you this. I could run this straight from here to this node right here. But what I'm doing is just to allow it to be a little bit cleaner. I'm saying create event, and then I'm just choosing reset actors right here. So when I compile, that's gonna point this whenever this event happens on the sequence manager class, it'll pass that down over to here. For the rest of the button, once we've got that configured that it knows who its manager is, it's gonna check on component hit for the player. So one thing to check is that the button does have under its collision simulation generates hit events, otherwise this won't fire. But if I have the button over here, it's going to check for the player to make sure the player did it, and to make sure that we can't activate a button more than once, we're going to use a do once node, and then if that is correct, it will fire off activate. And I'm overriding activate here. Remember, to override, you can go over here under the functions, drop down, and find the function you want to override. And so when I'm overriding, I'm going to set the color to be 4x, right? This is just whatever conveyance you're having that the thing has been activated. And then we're going to send off to the sequence manager, we're going to check progress. So with the sequence manager, us being able to check progress, we're going to pass along our own self. That way, when we go to check progress, it's the thing that gets added to the current sequence and gets compared to the key sequence to see if it's correct. All right, so that gets passed off. We'll talk about the reset in just a minute here. What happens when the player interacts with the button is that when they activate that 4x check progress is going to determine whether or not the whole sequence is correct. So each one of these instances is going to get bounced back if they have to reset. So when we get called a reset, this is going to change it to a different form of conveyance, saying that like it was an error, there was something wrong. This could just be for you something on the screen saying incorrect code, try again. And then we're going to wait a 2-second, whatever that delay is that you want, and then we're going to put it back to an active state, and we're going to reset our do once gate so they can activate the thing again. This delay here keeps it from being where if you're on the wrong button, that it automatically enters that button again, causing kind of like an infinite fail. So the delay is just going to help us to prevent that from being a point of frustration for the player. So with that in place, the only thing to consider with this is how many things that you have, what the order is going to be, and then what the targets are and how you want them to behave. So this gives us a collection of some decent assets in terms of how we can manage and extend this out into a larger environment of, collecting or talking to certain NPCs in a particular order, or maybe even a fetch quest that's, do A, then B, then C, then D, and it's just the collision that's detecting the player's interaction with those objects. But anyway, it's up to you on how you implement it. But hopefully this meets out the request of what you were asking for. If not, follow up with me, and I hope this lets you go out there and keep building.